Hey guys, got some more info to share with you here. The developer of Toolkit is simultaneously trying to get 10.8 out of beta, work on his own tables, update Toolkit on GitHub, and probably try to have his own life, which means that getting around to things like complete documentation of Toolkit has fallen somewhat by the wayside. Um, this means there are a handful of settings I'm just discovering, and more than a few things I'm not quite sure how to take advantage of. One of the things I just discovered, though, is pretty cool. It's the ability to preview the bakemaps and Lightmaps with their baked textures in Blender. So if you click on one of the bakemaps or the Lightmaps, you get some new options in the VLM panel. And one of them is load renders. So once your meshes are populated in VLM results, clicking on these will change the context of what appears in this VLM tab over here. So I'm going to click on Playfield Lightmap GI1, and we'll see we've got this load renders button here. And if we click that, it will load the renders from the renders folder. So why don't we select all of the lightmap and bakemap meshes and hit load renders. Now let's solo one of these meshes and take a look at the shader editor. If we select the bake texture node down here and look in the right node tab panel, we will see that indeed the render from the render folder is assigned here. Now check out the materials for this light map in the material tab. Right now I have VLM, GI, GI1, RG2 for render group 2 selected here, and that's why in the file browser result here it has group 2 selected. If I click the material for group 1, make sure this is selected, we'll get the render for group 1. We can see this more clearly if we select the first material, go into edit mode, and go down to select the polygons that this material is applied to. Okay, and we'll see we've got those polygons selected. Okay, let's go to the second one, which is render group 2. Let's select those polygons, right? Okay, we've got those selected. Maybe this makes sense to you what's going on, but for me it was a bit confusing sorting out these different kinds of nest maps, bake maps, light maps, the UV maps, and the render groups. But remember, the render groups were created in order to separate objects for camera baking so that no textures overlap. And remember that camera baking is like taking a snapshot of the table from the camera point of view. But a light map, which is this mesh that we're looking at, is like taking a snapshot of all the polygons that a light is able to see from every direction that that light spreads to. Until a certain point where the light is dim enough, and then polygons beyond that point of influence are excluded. So here in this light map, we have all the polygons that a light called GI1 in the GI light collection is able to see. And it can see polygons that have textures applied from multiple render groups, which is why in the material for this light map, we have multiple materials assigned. So if we shut off the VM result collection and we go and turn on our bake collection, and we have a tab here that allows you to select a render group. Okay, so let's select render group 1, hit enter, and let's solo that. And we can see all the objects that were assigned to render group 1. Let's try it for render group 2. I'll unsolo this, 2, enter. Okay, solo that, right? And if you remember earlier, this bumper skirt was part of group 2 material in our light map. So let's go check that out. If we turn off solo, turn off the bake map, go to the light map result, go down to the light map for GI1 we had selected, solo it, hit tab, deselect the polygons, go to this render group 2 material, hit select, you'll see that we've got some of those objects from render group 2 in this light map. So this is why our rendered images are labeled the way they are before they're cut up into nest maps. Let's just look at one of the render groups as an example in our render folder. Okay, if we go to Blender Tutorial, Renders, let's search for Group 0. Okay, and we have a Group 0 for GI Light 1, GI Light 2, GI Light 3, and 4, and then a world render for Group 0, which is the environmental lighting. And if you look at the file name, it starts with the collection name, and then the item in that collection, and then the group that it's assigned to. So Toolkit has conveniently assigned these stacked materials in Blender for us for preview purposes. So let's click on the material preview button and check out this light map. So I'm going to hit tab to get out of edit mode, and then I'm going to click away, and I'm just going to hit the material preview button, and there's our light map. And if you're wondering how I got this black background, I went to Edit, Preferences, 3D Viewport. I scrolled all the way down. I went to Theme Space. I went to Gradient Colors. I changed this from Vignette to Single Color, and then I changed the color from like kind of a dark gray to a black. And after I made those changes, I went up here and I added a new preset and I called it Black Background. You have to make the preset after you make the change or it won't get recorded. Okay, so we got this cool black background to check out our light map, and you can see it here. And we can turn on and off the light maps to preview them over the top of our bake maps. So what I'm going to do is get this out of, go back to shader mode, get this out of solo. I'm going to add 2 collections in here, and I wouldn't do that for exporting to VPX because I'm not sure how these need to be organized or if they come directly out of this collection and get injected into VPX. So I would, if you make any collections inside here for preview purposes, just get rid of them later. So I'm going to add bakemaps and Lightmaps, and then I'm going to select all the bakemaps, okay, and put those in the bakemaps folder. Our collection, these in the light maps. Okay, and then we will turn on our material preview. Give it a second while it loads up the images. Cool. All right, so there it is. And we can turn off the light maps group to see how it looks. And we can also turn off individual ones. So we've got this GI Light 3, right? And here's the GI Light 3 for just the left inlane rollover because that was separated as a different object. And so you're just going to see a tiny little highlight turn on and off for that light. And then we've got a left inlane light map just for GI4. And that'll also be another highlight on that object. There's our GI1 that was also assigned to our, or given this light was given the same name as GI1. So we got the bumper cap and GI1 linked up. GI2, GI3, and this is, we got the right in lane, so you can barely see that, right? Little bitty highlight on the right in lane mesh for GI1. That's nuts. And then GI2, that one. So now that these are previewable in Blender, if I wanted to, let me get back into shader mode here. If I wanted to, I could create a collection called, it could be called anything, but I'm going to call it, this is something Flux showed me, called bake.temp. And this is just a container to hold objects I don't want included in my render. Like if I'm just trying to test things so it can, it doesn't have to render everything. If I just want, if I don't want the movables included, I can just drop that in there and turn that collection off. And now when I run the batch, it won't include any of those objects. So that's super handy. So if I just wanted to test the bumper cap, I could take I can make one called parts.temp and just put all the parts that are in here except the bumper or the bumper part. So I could just take all these. Well, I could select everything and then unselect those and put them down into parts.temp and then run the batch. And it will go a lot faster. So now this preview in Blender is using, let's go back to that preview just because it looks cool. So if you load the Lightmaps and the bakemaps in Cycles view, there might be a way to change this, but because of the, I believe it's because of the transparency in the Lightmaps, and because the Lightmaps are in the exact same position in terms of the render order in Blender, the transparency will cut through the playfield and it looks funny, but transparency isn't rendered the same in the material preview. If you were like me, you're wondering where did the, like if I have one of these VLM result meshes selected and I go to their materials, there's 5 different materials with 5 different images for each of the render groups, including, well, it's render group 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh yeah, 5 render groups. And I'm like, well, where's the nest maps? Because the nest maps have a lot of different images in them. And if you go to the meshes here, you can see this UV map called UV map nested. So there is nest map data in these outputted meshes in VLM result. And actually, if you click on one of the light maps and you say select nest map, it will select all the light maps that correspond to one nest map. I'm not sure exactly which nest map that is. I'm not sure if that's listed somewhere. But if you were to look at this UV, let's just look at the UVs for this light map for GI1. We'll go into I hit tab to go into edit mode, and then I will hit A to select all polygons. Right. Okay. So, I believe, yep. If I now that I'm in edit mode, if I click on UV map, I'm getting the way the UVs are laid out for rendering the groups, which is that overhead snapshot view, right? If I click on the UV map nested, the UVs from that overhead snapshot are repacked to accommodate the UVs from, let me get out of edit mode, to accommodate the UVs from these other mesh objects. So remember, the nest maps are part of how Toolkit optimizes the renders for space and performance. It packs the textures from multiple light maps into one image, and it packs their UVs accordingly. And you don't need the nest maps for preview purposes in Blender, but if you're wondering when those come into play, they come into play when the toolkit table is injected back into VPX, where all the light maps and bake maps will use the nest map images for their textures. Same. Well, I think that covers this topic, but there'll be more tips and workflow related guides, hopefully in coming videos.